The year is 1347. Lady Margaret stands trembling in the town square of Canterbury, her once noble garments torn and stained. The crowd roars with bloodthirsty anticipation as the executioner approaches, his blade gleaming in the morning sun. Her crime? She dared to love another man while married. In just moments, she will face the ultimate medieval punishment for adultery. But her story is just one of thousands that reveal the terrifying reality of unfaithful spouses in the Dark Ages. What you're about to discover will shock you to your core. The medieval world didn't just punish adultery, it turned it into a public spectacle of horror that would make modern horror films seem tame by comparison. And the methods they used, well, let's just say that what happened to Lady Margaret was considered merciful. But before we dive into this blood-soaked chapter of history, smash that like button if you're ready to explore the darkest corners of medieval justice. And don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell, because trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next in this series. The medieval period stretched from roughly 500 to 1500 CE, and during this time, adultery wasn't just considered a sin, it was viewed as a crime against God, society, and the very fabric of civilization itself. Marriage was the cornerstone of medieval society, not just a romantic union, but a complex web of property rights, family alliances, and social stability. When someone committed adultery, they weren't just betraying their spouse, they were striking at the heart of the entire social order. Picture this. It's a cold February morning in 1203, and villagers in the French countryside are gathering around the church steps. A woman named Isabelle is being dragged forward, her hands bound, her head already partially shaved in shame. She had been caught with the local blacksmith while her merchant husband was away on business. The crowd jeers and throws rotten vegetables, but this public humiliation is only the beginning of her torment. The church held enormous power during the medieval period, and their interpretation of biblical law shaped how adultery was punished. According to medieval Christian doctrine, adultery was not only a violation of the seventh commandment, but also a form of theft, stealing another person's spouse. This dual nature of the crime meant that both religious and secular authorities had jurisdiction, often leading to double punishments that were absolutely devastating. But here's where it gets truly disturbing. The punishments varied dramatically depending on your gender and social status. A noble lady caught in adultery might face a relatively quick death, while a peasant woman could endure weeks of public torture before meeting her end. And men? Well, their punishments tell a story of medieval double standards that will leave you speechless. Let me take you back to 1176, to the court of Henry II of England. Lady Eleanor de Montfort, wife of a powerful baron, has been accused of adultery with a young knight. The evidence? A love letter discovered hidden in her prayer book. As she stands before the king's justice, she knows that her noble birth might save her from the most gruesome punishments reserved for common folk, but it won't save her from the ultimate penalty. The most common punishment for adultery across medieval Europe was death, but the methods of execution varied in their creativity and cruelty. For women, burning at the stake was particularly favored, as fire was believed to purify the soul of sexual sin. The victim would be tied to a wooden post, surrounded by bundles of kindling and larger logs. As the flames began to lick at their feet, the crowd would often sing hymns, believing they were witnessing divine justice in action. But burning wasn't the only method. In some regions, adulterous women faced drowning in specially constructed pools or rivers, their hands and feet bound as they were thrown into the water. The logic was brutal yet systematic. If God wanted to save them, they would miraculously survive. If they drowned, it was proof of their guilt and divine judgment. For men, the punishments were often different, but no less horrific. Hanging was common, but castration was also frequently employed, either as a standalone punishment or as a precursor to execution. The medieval mind saw a twisted justice in removing the very organ that had committed the sin. Now, here's something that might surprise you. Not all adulterers were executed immediately. Many faced elaborate systems of public shaming designed to destroy their reputation and social standing before their eventual death. Let me paint you a picture of what this looked like. Imagine walking through the streets of medieval Paris in 1289. Suddenly, you hear the sound of bells and jeering crowds. A procession is making its way down the cobblestone street. At its center, a man and woman are being paraded through the town, completely naked except for signs around their necks detailing their crime. Their heads have been shaved, and they've been smeared with honey to attract flies and other insects. This is the walk of shame, and it could last for days, moving from town to town. ensuring that everyone in the region knew of their sin. But the creativity of medieval punishment didn't stop there. In some German territories, adulterous couples were sewn together in a large sack and thrown into a river, alive. This punishment, known as puniculae, was borrowed from ancient Roman law and represented the ultimate fusion of the guilty parties in their final moments. The implements of torture used before execution were equally inventive and horrifying. The Judas cradle was a pyramid-shaped seat onto which victims were slowly lowered, the point penetrating their body as they were gradually impaled. The breast ripper was specifically designed for women accused of adultery, its iron claws heated red-hot before being used to tear flesh. These weren't just instruments of death, they were psychological weapons designed to terrorize entire communities into moral compliance. Let's return to our story of Lady Margaret from the opening. Historical records from Canterbury Cathedral suggest that she was accused of adultery with a traveling merchant who had stayed at her husband's estate. The evidence against her was circumstantial. Servants had seen them talking intimately in the garden, and she had given him a ring. In the medieval world, this was more than enough for a death sentence. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. On the morning of her execution, as Margaret stood on the scaffold, a messenger arrived on horseback. He carried a letter bearing the seal of the Archbishop of Canterbury himself. The crowd fell silent as the letter was read aloud. It contained a confession from the merchant, written on his deathbed in a distant city, claiming that Lady Margaret was innocent and that he had stolen the ring she was accused of giving him as a lover's token. This dramatic reversal wasn't uncommon in medieval times. The justice system, such as it was, often relied on confessions, witness testimony, and even trial by ordeal. Sometimes the truth emerged too late to save the condemned, but in Margaret's case, divine intervention, or perhaps just good timing, saved her life. The concept of trial by ordeal deserves special attention when discussing medieval adultery punishments. If the evidence was unclear, suspected adulterers might be subjected to various tests believed to reveal God's judgment. The most common was trial by water. The accused would be bound and thrown into a body of water. If they floated, they were guilty, because the pure water rejected their sinful body. If they sank and drowned, they were innocent, but unfortunately dead. Another form was trial by fire, where the accused had to carry a red-hot iron bar for a certain distance or walk barefoot over burning coals. If their wounds healed cleanly within 3 days, they were innocent. If infection set in, they were guilty and would face execution, assuming they survived the ordeal itself. But perhaps the most psychologically devastating punishment wasn't physical at all. In many medieval communities, proven adulterers who survived their initial punishment were marked for life. Women might have their noses or ears cut off, permanently disfiguring them and marking them as unchaste. Men might be branded on the forehead with the letter A for adulterer. These individuals became social pariahs, unable to remarry, hold positions of trust, or even enter certain buildings. The double standard between male and female punishment reveals much about medieval attitudes toward gender and sexuality. While both men and women could face death for adultery, women were far more likely to be executed, and their punishments were often more public and humiliating. This reflected the medieval belief that women were naturally more lustful and therefore more dangerous to social order when they strayed from virtue. Regional variations in punishment were stark and telling. In Italy, influenced by Roman law traditions, adulterous women might be forced to live in special houses, essentially medieval red light districts, where they were available to any man who wanted them. This living death was considered by some to be worse than execution, as it condemned the woman to a lifetime of sexual slavery. In Scandinavia, the harsh climate influenced punishment methods. Adulterers might be stripped naked and left exposed to the elements, a slow and agonizing death by hypothermia. The community would gather to watch as the condemned slowly succumbed to the cold, their final hours serving as a warning to others. As we near the end of our journey through this dark chapter of history, it's important to understand that these punishments weren't just about justice, they were about control. Medieval society was built on strict hierarchies and clear rules. Adultery threatened the legitimacy of inheritance, the stability of political alliances, and the moral authority of the church. The extreme punishments served as deterrents, but they also reinforced the power structures that kept medieval society functioning according to its rigid codes. The legacy of these brutal practices extended far beyond the medieval period. Many of the attitudes toward adultery and the double standards applied to men and women persisted for centuries, influencing legal systems and social norms well into the modern era. In some parts of the world, Echoes of these medieval punishments can still be found in contemporary legal codes. But what happened to Lady Margaret after her dramatic rescue? Historical records suggest she lived quietly for another 30 years, never remarrying, dedicating herself to charitable works within the church. Her near execution became a cautionary tale told throughout Canterbury for generations, a reminder of how quickly fortune could change in the medieval world. The story of medieval punishment for adultery is ultimately a story about power, fear, and the lengths to which societies will go to maintain order. These weren't primitive people acting on bloodthirsty impulses. They were intelligent individuals operating within a complex system of beliefs about sin, justice, and divine will. Understanding their motivations doesn't excuse their actions, but it helps us appreciate how far human civilization has come in terms of justice and human rights. As we close this dark chapter, remember that the next time you hear someone complain about modern relationship problems, at least they don't have to worry about being sewn into a sack and thrown into a river. The medieval world was a place where love could literally be a matter of life and death. Did this video shock you as much as it did me when I first researched these historical accounts? Let me know in the comments below what surprised you most about medieval justice. And don't forget to subscribe, because next week we're diving into an even more disturbing topic: medieval torture methods for accused witches. Trust me, you thought this was bad? You haven't seen anything yet. Like this video if you learned something new, share it with your history-loving friends, and I'll see you in the next episode, where we continue our journey through the darkest corners of human history.